A special edition today of Biz One-on-One with my long-term friend and associate, Adrian Bohach, who is a worldwide thought leader in the world of social enterprise. And we're going to learn some things today, including the top 3 reasons the economy needs social enterprise. That'll be coming up. Adrian Bohach, welcome. And we're very thrilled to have you here, and it's something I've been looking forward to because you have such an amazing story to tell. You got your start as an actuarial.
That's right.
So tell me the story of building your own, I mean, you're an entrepreneur. You built your own actuarial firm. Tell us about that.
I started as typical of people of my day started, and that is through getting a job at an insurance company after university and articled for 10 years. I actually didn't article the full 10 years.
So the articling process was 10 years?
To become a full-fledged fellow, you had to do it for 10 years.
Wow.
And to be an associate, it was 7. And so I did 7 years. And so I went through all the big insurance company experience and then went on my own. And through a series of events that were not of my own doing, but how the environment works sometimes, I got into organizational development. And since the early 90s, I had been in that realm doing consulting work for very large organizational change projects, mergers, acquisitions, bankruptcy sometimes, and that's how my career sort of developed. And
so how do you go from being an actuarial, what is an actuarial, by the way?
Well, yeah, some people unflatteringly sort of say that it's a very mathematical, statistical person with no personality, and because you're very much stuck under a rock for many, many years learning your trade, and that's why I actually didn't finish. It's because I couldn't see myself going the other 3 years, and it didn't really matter to me career-wise, so I just went on my own from that.
So you got into this whole organizational change and large organizations.
10,000 employees and up.
When there's some kind of change coming in, they bring you in to do what?
Well, when you have large organizations come together, the term merger is used, but really it's a takeover. There's really no such thing as merger. Even in Canadian law, it's a takeover. So when you have large organizations come together, you have 2 systems, you have 2 cultures, you have everything coming together, one dominant and one not dominant. And as a result, there's a lot of people breakage. There's a lot of system breakage that happens with that. So organizations that are a little more thoughtful about it would hire someone like me to come in and set up a model of a process to bring in the 2 organizations in a meaningful way to reduce people breakage. It's very expensive to lose people. When people leave an organization because of disruption, it's usually because they can find a job somewhere else. So the best people are the ones that usually leave, and
right.
And so that's expensive. And disruption is expensive. So again, forward-thinking leadership in corporations would hire a person like me to bring in a model of change that reduces the friction and abrasiveness of that disruption and channel it down a meaningful way.
Now, how did you get into the role of being a thought leader and implementing your ideas and others' ideas around quote-unquote social enterprise? You actually took over a struggling charity and said, we're turning this into a social enterprise.
Yes.
So what is social enterprise?
Well, social enterprise, if you or any of your listeners would Google the term, you'd come up with nowadays literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different terms and definitions. The one that we've used for the last couple decades is this: using business methodology to accomplish a public good. Using business methodology to accomplish a public good. Now, if that sounds like a fairly simple, straightforward statement, and if you wrote it down and stared at it a little bit, you will see how different it is, how unique it is, how curious it is in a way, and you'll be able to notice the game-changing aspect of it. It's a game changer for the nonprofit sector. It's a game changer for the for-profit sector. People who engage in social enterprise can be for-profit or nonprofit. But really what it means is to look at a social problem or a social issue and to stare at it and rethink it in a way that it can be addressed in a financially self-sustaining way. And actually, the more self-sustaining it is, the more mission aspect you can create, the more mission aspect that you can create positively affects the bottom line and makes you more successful financially.
So practically speaking, you took a charity, like with a charitable license.
Yes.
What was it called at the time?
It was called a Technical Resource Center.
The Technical Resource Center.
Technical Resource Center.
And it was a registered charity.
Yes.
And it was down to like 3 or 4 people. So it was basically just about out of, I would use the term out of business, but it's not a business, it's a charity.
Yeah.
What did you do?
When I first became involved in this, it was functionally bankrupt. It was struggling. The staff were looking for other jobs. The board was all quitting, and it was as typical of nonprofits to get into that situation in a real shambles. In Maslow's hierarchy of organizational needs, it was on life support. I got involved because I had been doing some tithing of my time to help nonprofit organizations using my organizational development background. And
In your business background, you're also, you buy and sell real estate, and you're a real estate lender, so you're a successful business guy. And so you decide to give back with some of your time.
Exactly. So instead of writing checks, I never knew where the checks went. And every time I wrote one, the same people would come back to me the next year and ask for more.
More.
So I didn't want to do that. And I think that and I'm impassioned by impact. And I'm impassioned by getting my hands dirty and thinking that I could do better that way than just by simply writing a check.
And speaking of writing checks, that's the charitable model.
Yes.
There's how many charities in Canada, roughly?
Well, nonprofits are somewhere between 200 and 210,000. 40% of them
Are
charitable.
registered charities.
Yeah.
So over 100,000 people, groups out there in what you call putting their head to carpet and begging for money.
Putting their head to carpet and begging for money. Any business has competitors. Every business has competitors. And it's hard to be successful. But just imagine if you have that many competitors looking for, to resource themselves and whatever they want to do. It's very, very difficult, very time consuming.
And there's this thing called donor fatigue.
Donor fatigue.
That is a plague around North America, Europe, probably all over the developed world.
Well, precisely. I think people nowadays are as community-minded and as charitable as they have ever been. Probably more so with the rise of millennials. Millennials are even more interested in their environment and their social responsibility. But what is happening when you have that much pressure on you as an individual or a corporation of constantly people asking you for money, you become a little jaundiced by it, and there is a real authentic desire by everybody, whether it's a huge bank to a senior in a retirement project, that there has to be a different way. There must be a different way. That people are getting sick and tired of the constant pressure on them to support some kind of charitable cause.
We're talking to Adrian Bohach from the Enterprise for Good.
Enterprise
is the
for
new
Good.
name of your social enterprise.
Yes.
And we did promise our viewers that you're going to share the 3 reasons the economy needs social enterprise. 1, 2, 3. What are they?
Okay, so the 3 things that come to my mind is a social enterprise has the scale and the financial and the corporate ability to actually address a problem in a meaningful way, and that meaningfulness may be an actual solution. Addressing it could mean a long-term sustainable benefit that makes a problem go away, or at least to reduce it. When you think of those 210,000 organizations, there are not more than maybe a handful that have the financial and the organizational bench strength to actually solve a problem. So that's
number 1.
Number 1. Number 2 is that people are desiring change. You mentioned donor fatigue. There are other forces at play here. There's a strong sense around the world that institutions have failed us, that somehow the tried and true, the way we've done things over and over again have not resulted in anything that has benefited us.
And number 3?
Well, number 3 is sort of a combination of the first 2, and this is impact. And I think that what people desire in terms of change, in terms of bench strength, is they desire authentic impact. They want to see something different. They want to experience something different. And the way that the for-profit world is organized and the way the nonprofit world is organized is not that much different today than it was 10 years ago, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And the impact of things just hasn't been recognized by the public at large. I mean, has hunger gone away? Has kids with disabilities gone away? Has really any social issue gone away, or has it actually increased?
We're talking social enterprise on the special edition of Biz One-on-One with Adrian Bohach. And when we come back, he's going to share with us the 3 things that nonprofits are addicted to. Back with Adrian Bohach on this special edition of Biz One-on-One, talking about social enterprise. And Adrian, you've now really devoted your life to social enterprise. You're still involved in the real estate business, your own real estate business. You're still traveling around the world doing your organizational management consulting. But what is it about social enterprise that has you so lit up?
I'm all about impact. I am passionate about impact. I want something to happen. And social enterprise is the only thing to me that actually delivers that. When I look at, we work a lot with kids with autism. That's one of the many things that we do. But I'll tell you a story. There's this about 9-year-old boy that is on the autism spectrum, on the savant sort of end of things. Mm-hmm. And he is a child that when you give him a textbook, he could read it in about a couple of hours and then give you the text backwards. So you could say page 22, what was the text? He could tell it to you, regurgitate it to you backwards.
Reverse order.
Reverse order.
Wow.
But he can't tell a nickel from a dime. He can't tell a nickel from a dime. I have 9 children, and as a parent, one of the aspects of being a parent is you want a future for your children. You want the best for your children. It is difficult for me to imagine a child that has that kind of challenge in their life, and how do you unlock the possibilities of that child? And unfortunately, without a proper kind of system of service, and it could be that wonderful mind, that wonderful boy could grow up to be sitting in some long-term care facility or in a group home, living on public funding, and
because he doesn't fit in, he can end up institutionalized.
Yeah, very difficult to employ. All the usual stories that prevent people from accessing so-called mainstream life. I'm passionate for that child and for thousands like him to have a future.
So autism is exploding.
Yes.
Government's programs and, you know, whatever it is, the Autism Society or, you know, whatever the charity that starts up to deal with that, you know, they're scrambling. So you with Enterprise for Good, being a social enterprise, you know, doing something good, but using business practices.
Yes.
Enterprise for Good, the difference is what? Is it this idea that because you're running it like a business and you're generating revenues and you're using effective things, processes that have worked in your business, you know, your business background, that it becomes more sustainable? Is that the key?
Well, yes, you've got about 10 questions in there. So let's kind of look at it from a larger perspective. A social enterprise is neither a nonprofit, it's neither a for-profit. It is something unto itself. It's a different cat. And so when we look at problems, we look at them in a different way. So, and that way is, from, let's say from a nonprofit's perspective, we would say, okay, how can we address this problem and actually try to solve it in a financially self-sustaining way? If we look at it from a for-profit perspective, we might say, how can we put more mission, more public good in the business processes of a for-profit entity? So when we think of autism, we would say, okay, how can we provide service in a financially self-sustaining way rather than pressing, as you say, for our foreheads to carpet and begging for money, which all it means is that we have to beg for more next year. And all that means is that we have to expend a lot of our energy on finding that money and begging for it.
Fundraising.
Fundraising, exactly. So we create business activity around the service itself, plus other kinds of business activity that supports that service in such a way that I can look somebody in the eye and say, your service is guaranteed, given normal market forces and risks, forever.
So give me an example of how you do that.
Well, I'll give you a few. First is that we've taken our intellectual property around autism, where we now have a world-renowned reputation in the sphere, and we charge fees to provide that service. And those fees are sometimes paid by the parents, sometimes it's paid by an insurance company, sometimes it's paid by a government or someone else. And there's a value proposition there that attracts business to us. And so basically we can provide that service forever, as long as we have the proper human resources. Then we have other businesses, like we're in the real estate business, we're in the commercial real estate business, and in offices and apartment buildings and things like that. We're soon to be getting into the seniors housing that generates revenue.
But when you say you're in the real estate business, you're literally nothing to do with autism, nothing to do with the social good. You're acquiring buildings, renting them out, and generating revenue. But you're using your charitable status for the down payment. That's creative thinking.
Yeah, well, we do that. But I'll tell you that in our apartment buildings, all our resident managers have a special need. 2 of them have autism. Our property manager is a lady in a power chair. She's a C3/4 quadriplegic. So we could. That's one of the aspects of social enterprise, is to bury your mission in the actual cost of goods sold and margin of a business. So it's, if you just are having a business and extracting profits to fund some program, in my mind, that's just a funky new way of fundraising.
Got it.
What we want to do is to actually imbue our mission into the operation, so that instead of working on 5 or 6% of total revenue in terms of profit, we're working with 100% of revenues.
Adrian Bohach from Enterprise for Good. We're delving into this whole concept of social enterprise, which might be new to you. When we come back, we are going to touch on the 3 things that nonprofits are addicted to. Stay with us. back with Adrian Bohach from Enterprise for Good as we explore the whole world of social enterprise on Biz One-on-One. And social enterprise is not nonprofit, it's not for-profit, it's this different animal. But we promise to share with our viewers what are the three things that nonprofits are addicted to.
Well, we're organized as a nonprofit charity. That's who we are, but operating in a social enterprise way. So we've really moved ourselves away from the charitable space. But the three addictions are simply this: money, attention, and self-preservation. So a substantial amount, some people might argue too much, of the resources of a typical nonprofit, whether they have charitable status or not, are expended towards getting money, attention, and self-preservation.
And none of those three addictions have anything, they're not directly related to whatever the cause is.
Exactly. So people's employees' employment status is constantly at risk. It's dependent on the success or failure of the next grant or golf tournament or black tie dinner or whatever it is. So they're constantly going from one pillar to post. Just imagine if you ran your own personal financial affairs or the affairs of any for-profit company where you had to beg for your money.
Right.
And it was tenable, like you were never sure, you could never plan. And that's one of the things that we can do. We can plan decades down the road if we wanted to, and we do, that and actually, as part of that planning, look at solving problems.
So let's explore one specific example that I'm familiar with because I'm working with you on this, and that is you're getting into the retirement home business.
Sure.
As a charity. So just run through how that works quickly, and so you can, because I think this is a perfect illustration of what we're talking about.
So the way we acquire them is through a combination of debt and using a charitable receipt as a down payment, so that it doesn't drain any cash out of us for programming.
So the seller of the retirement home business grabs a charitable receipt and uses that in lieu of cash for a down payment, and you finance the whole thing through a bank.
Exactly.
So that's step one of being a creative way that a charity isn't gonna, they're not gonna think that way.
They're not going to think that way. It's a simple concept. As I love to say, an untrained monkey can understand the concept, but it's very difficult to do because you have to, lenders look at you, like because you're a charity, and what do you know about retirement and all of that sort of stuff. So you have to demonstrate some bona fides to make it work. But once we have the property, then we can apply social enterprise thinking, like I'd mentioned previously. So how do you imbue your mission into the guts of the operation? So if you think of a typical retirement place, it has a dining room, it has a hair salon, it has maybe a pool, it maybe has some pool tables, it's got all kinds of amenities, a theater, what have you. Now, when you walk into a typical project like that, the dining room is used breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the rest of the time is sitting empty. But that real estate is paid for. Like that footprint is paid for. The hairdressing salon is sitting empty most of the time. The pool is sitting empty most of the time. So why couldn't you have a Boys and Girls Club come in and use the dining room for some of their programming? Why couldn't you have the hairdressing salon used for low-income women to tart themselves up before a job interview? Why couldn't you use the pool for special needs kids? Why couldn't you imbue a daycare center right inside the organization which would benefit? All of this stuff benefits the residents. So that's on the physical side of things. So this is, on the physical side of things, assets that are underutilized and are locked away from the community around it that we can monetize.
But why wouldn't a for-profit retirement home do the same thing?
They could. There's nothing stopping them. The issue for them is they don't think that way. They don't know how to do programs. They don't know how to do a mentorship program between a senior and a teenager, for example. They're not in that space, and they don't know how to run it like that. We do. So that's on the physical side, but more importantly on the people side of things, when you have a retirement project like my mom and dad live, you have a wealth of wisdom and experience, life experience, just there. It's like a big vein of gold in a bunch of gravel. I don't know what philosopher said, and when an elderly person dies, it's like a major library in the world burns down.
Right.
So, and the number one issue with seniors is they're alone, they're lonely. So why can't we match a retired electrician with an apprentice in the community? Why couldn't we match a retired teacher with someone that's going to university to become a teacher? All of this is absolutely available to the community, that makes it a benefit to the people that live there. So all of a sudden, we have a facility in the community that is where the walls are permeable, where the assets, physical and intellectual, are being used, and at the same time it makes it the best place to live in that community. It becomes the go-to place that people want to go to and live.
And enterprise for good, because you're running it like a business and generating revenue instead of begging for money. It makes it all sustainable,
All self-sustainable.
and the profits that come out of there can be applied to your other ventures, for example, in helping autistic families. Wow. Adrian, we just scratched the surface, I know, because I've had many long conversations with you, but thank you so much for joining us today on Biz One-on-One. It's a real pleasure.